Welcome to the first episode of Behind the Story. I'm your host, Vinaya Bryson. In this series, I interview people in an effort to explore creative minds and their journeys behind the scenes. My vision for this series entails interviewing all kinds of creative minds from all kinds of industries. I am a filmmaker though, which means I spend a lot of time with people who are also in the industry. So I think it's safe to say that a lot of my guests, at least at first, will probably be from the filmmaking industry. And that's okay with me. On that note, I am thrilled to introduce Tyler Mason, who is a writer, director, and cinematographer. I met Tyler through a mutual filmmaker friend who accurately predicted that we would get along very well. I had the opportunity to see some of his work before we met, and I was blown away by his ability to make movies beautiful. To my surprise, he saw my work and also liked it and offered collaboration on my projects. Tyler's passion and his wealth of knowledge and his generosity have been invaluable in shaping my own filmmaking journey, and I just can't thank him enough. So, settle in as we explore the creative world of Tyler Mason. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your background. So, like, where you're from, where you went to school, what you studied, etc.
Okay, I'm Tyler Mason. I am from Columbus, Ohio. I was born in Hilliard, moved to Grove City after a while. I went to college at the University of Toledo, and I started out in engineering and very quickly realized that that was not my thing at all.
Yeah.
And so, but I knew I didn't want to get a film degree for me personally.
Wait, you knew when you were in college that you didn't want a film degree?
100%, yes.
Wow, okay. I didn't know you had considered it.
Yes. Well, I'd been thinking about it ever since I was very young, because I was always interested in film ever since I was very young.
Yeah.
And so I decided I wanted something a little different while I was going to be self-taught in film. And as I was learning from YouTube, just hands-on experience, I wanted to get a different kind of degree. And so after engineering became not it, I searched around, I changed to economics, and I got an economics degree. And who else here has an economics degree?
Me. I have an economics degree. And who here is using their economics degree?
Looks like neither of us.
Yeah, unfortunately. Fortunately? Do you regret getting your economics degree?
No, not at all. I think economics is incredibly fascinating.
Yeah.
Though, if I could do it differently, I would have double majored in marketing as well. So, for everyone out there who's in like college or something like that, marketing, if you're trying to pair that with film, acting, something like that, usually makes you very marketable.
Then what inspired you to make the switch then?
Well, I think I was kind of always inspired with film, because from the time that I was 6 years old, I was really into dinosaurs when I was around 6 years old. That was my big thing. And I saw the movie Jurassic Park. And of course, any kid who's interested in dinosaurs, they're going to love Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
And it captivated my imagination. And I just, looked at it and I saw, this thing that had only been inside my head up to this point be brought to life on the screen. And it felt so real. It felt so immersive. And, it was like my childhood dreams come alive in that way. And at that point, I started thinking like, oh, so this is how you make dreams a reality. This is how you take what's inside your head and make it real. And that was very appealing to me, because I was always very creative as a kid. As young as kindergarten, whenever I would get done with school, I'd go down into my grandparents' basement and I would cut these figurines out of paper and then just like paste them together and give them arms and give them heads and draw features on them and things like that. And I would use them to enact like plot lines and such. And
by yourself, or are you like?
Yeah, literally just by myself, like playing with like handmade toys.
Amazing.
It's the equivalent of like playing with action figures and like enacting a story with action figures. But when I saw Jurassic Park, I was just like, oh, you can make it really real. And that was really fascinating to me. And then as I got just a little bit older, probably like 2 years after that, I really got into sharks, saw the movie Jaws. Same story with Jaws. it kind of caught my eye in just the same way. And then finally I saw Raiders of the Lost Ark a few years later, and that really got me, I was really, I was getting a little bit older. I was maybe like 10 or something like that. And so I was getting more into the action adventure stuff, and seeing that really come about on the big screen was very cool. And I think between those three movies, like there's so much nostalgia with those three films. Those are like the quintessential imagination brought to life type movies for a lot of people. And so I think that those three, primarily Jurassic Park, were really what got me into it.
Yeah.
Now, I wasn't from that moment saying I need to be a filmmaker. I was just very passionate about it. I wanted to be when I was 6 years old, but then as I got older, I kind of started getting more realistic about it. And I started thinking like, okay, what do I want to do? Do I want to be a lawyer? Do I want to go into business? Like something like that. And I ping-ponged back and forth. But I was always very creative, and I was always very interested in film and very interested in art. And I would say probably around 8th grade, I really made the decision where I was like, no, filmmaking is what I want to pursue in my life. And so that's when I started really getting into immersing myself in film, watching a lot of different movies, and it just kind of took off from there. And no matter what I did in college, no matter what side tracks I took, no matter what backup plans I had or addendums I had to those plans, it didn't make a difference in the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal was always filmmaking since 8th grade, and deep down, much earlier than that. But then when I got out of college, I could not get a job to save my life. Like, I could not get a job as a bank teller for $10 an hour. I applied to like 10, 12 different banks, and none of them would even take me for that. So then I was like, okay, well, I got to make money. What else do I know how to do? And so I just went for filmmaking, and somehow it worked out.
So you've been sustaining yourself since you were 22, right? Kind of out of college?
Yeah, 23 when I got out of college.
Same.
Yeah, whatever.
So you've been making most of your money with like what, commercials, or how do you turn film into money?
It kind of transitioned over time. So when I first started out, it was just like, you go and become a production assistant on different sets and things like that. And they all go in there, and you work with the producers a lot of times as a production assistant, and the producers always tell you the same thing. They tell you, oh, I remember when I was a production assistant, keep being a good production assistant, you'll work your way up, and that's absolutely nonsense. So, maybe if you got connections, maybe if your family knows someone, you can do that. But like, other than that, when they see you in a production assistant role, which there's nothing wrong with that at all. Like, people literally make careers as a production assistant, and they love it, and that's absolutely wonderful. But, for somebody who is looking to advance to other positions beyond that, that's really not the way to go, because, there's this thing I found, because I was working on New York, LA productions that were coming to Columbus. I was working on, commercials and features that were shooting here locally. And the thing that I really learned is that people see you as what you market yourself as. And part of how you're marketing yourself is with the jobs you take. And so if you keep taking jobs as a production assistant, it doesn't matter what you say, it doesn't matter what you put out there, people are going to see you as that. And so I was just like, okay, I'll take these jobs for a little while to sustain myself, but I'm going to work on cinematography and such. Because I really, writing and directing was the goal. But those are the two most difficult things to actually make money in.
Yeah.
So I was like, all right, well, you need practical skills on top of that, which is fine, because even as a writer or a director, the more practical skills you have, the more that will help you as a communicator with people that you're working with. So that was actually very good for me. So I got into both cinematography and videography, and I just started learning those. And over time, I would use websites like Staff Me Up or Mandy or other film-specific networking job sites to, just get different roles as a videographer or a cinematographer. And eventually, I started making most of my money that way as kind of like a producer-shooter type role, where they would, somebody from a different city calls you up. They say, you need to come out here at this time. You'll work with the client. You'll set everything up. You'll kind of run the show here based on this bullet point list that we have given you. And then you'll basically do it all one-man band kind of.
Wow.
So that was a lot of what I did for a while. And then after a while of that, I started really trying to get more into working with my own clients. And it's about half and half now. Like about half the time I'm working with like a New York or Los Angeles or some kind of production company, even if it's just a local production company. A local production company who needs a freelancer to do work for hire. And then about the other half of the time I get businesses or individuals calling me up saying, hey, I have a company, I want to shoot a promotional video. I have a band, I want to shoot a music video. Things like that.
Wow. I think like the fact that you have sustained yourself for this long, I mean, just, it sounds like almost you kind of fell into it.
I did, yes. A lot earlier than I was expecting.
Right. I mean, but that's amazing because like the wealth of knowledge that you have is just incredible.
Well, thank you.
And yeah, I think
I'm very flattered by that.
Oh yeah, well, it's true. Okay, so let's move a little bit, move on to like the actual experience of it all. How many movies, if you know, have you worked on up until this point?
Several dozen at least.
Yeah.
And
this is like movies that other people have written, and you've gone and
Yes.
worked on them. Yeah,
exactly.
That's incredible. How many features out of that do you think?
Have I just worked on?
Yeah.
Much less.
Yeah.
So I helped out with a web series in Cincinnati, and that was kind of similar to a feature. I mean, it's episodic, but it has an overarching narrative. It's a Twilight Zone type of thing. It's called Wildfire. It was organized by some of my Cincinnati friends like David James, Stefanica Kay, Victoria McDevitt, some really great people down in Cincinnati. And they put quite a thing together. Like, you know, when you do all 10 episodes together, it's over 200 minutes of material. And, you know, really they got a lot of people involved. They got a lot of very passionate people involved. They themselves were very dedicated. And so I guess maybe that could kind of qualify as a feature, even though it's a web series, an episodic piece.
Yeah.
I worked on a few features of my own back in the day when I was silly enough to not realize how difficult it is to do a feature.
Yeah.
Unless you are really, really solid and really extremely well organized, you're not really going to get what you need for that.
I mean, even then, you know.
Even then it's tough because
Yeah.
you're, you know, unless you have millions of dollars to throw at it, you are at the mercy of a lot of factors that are beyond your control.
Yeah.
But so a lot of times I don't really work on features because it's like, you know, they either never get done or they get done and then they just don't get edited, which, you know, no shame on anyone because I've done that before. Sometimes things just happen. Or they get done, they get completed, and then you go see them in the theater and you're just like, this is kind of bad. Or, you know, they get tied up in festival circuits for multiple years and nothing ever really happens. And no matter which way you slice it, it ends up being a bit of waste of resources.
If, you know, studios in Hollywood, right, take years to produce a film, you know, then I think it's pretty understandable that we're struggling with that. So, out of all of the movies that you've done, what are your 3 favorites and why?
Well, so we're getting into a little older territory here because I had to take quite the hiatus due to COVID. And naturally, and I think most everybody in the film world can empathize with this, is that it was a slow start after COVID. But I think that as of right now, my favorite would be easily Powder Room from 2018. And I did that production for Winter Film that year. And that one sticks with me for a lot of reasons. When I go back on it, and you know, it's 6 years old at this point, which gives me an existential crisis as I sit here to say that that thing is 6 years old. We made that thing 6 years ago. That's crazy. But 6 years old at this point. So, you know, I look at it and I'm just like, okay, yeah. With one hand tied behind my back, I could make a higher quality film, higher production quality. And the same is true for everybody. Like, you know, my cinematographer, like, he could do something better with his eyes closed now. We've just gotten better over time.
Sure. It's still gorgeous, by the way.
Well, thank you. But that's the thing is, like, even though we were a little less experienced on a lot of the production elements, and that's not to say that it wasn't good. Everyone did a good job, and I think it still looks all right for the modern day. But really, what sticks out to me is I connected extremely well with the character that I made, and
just the main.
Well, I mean, technically, yes. That's the main one that sticks out to me.
Sure.
The character, whose name is Evelyn, is one of my favorite characters that I've ever designed as a writer. And the reason I think it turned out so well was because I came up with the idea a year before for the previous winter film competition in Cincinnati, where you get a month to write, shoot, and edit a short film, 10 to 12 minutes, based on certain elements that you're given. It works much like a 48. And I got the idea for Winter Film 2017, but we elected to go with something different as a result of the resources that we had. But then when it came to Winter Film 2018, I was like, now I'm feeling we need to do this one. And so for a full year, I had the role in mind, I had the general story in mind, and I designed the role specifically to tailor to one of my longtime collaborators. Her name is Asia Nicole, and she's an actress here in Columbus. And so the role was specifically designed for her. She and I had a very immersive process getting into the character. And it yields a lot of funny anecdotes, because like we would be very intense with each other during the process. There were times where we were like snapping at each other, like getting kind of mean with each other and such, but not in like, a way that was actually us getting upset with one another. It was pre-planned, pre-coordinated. We both said, all right, we are comfortable with this somewhat aggressive dynamic on set, because we know that this is what is going to bring out the best in both of us specifically. And it did. And there were times where during the shoot, people would come up to me and they'd be like, are you guys okay? And I'm like, it's fine, don't worry about it. We were both tapping into something about ourselves that was a little on the ugly side, on the dark side for it. Because the whole movie's about, it's about addiction, but it's the thing that connects me to it is that it's not just a don't do drugs kind of nonsense. Like I don't really care about that. It's showing how with anything, and in this case, drugs are simply the vehicle. It shows that when a person has enough loss and enough pain in their life, they can lose themselves to anything that feels like it can prop you up and make you feel just a little bit better is something that becomes dangerous at that point, something that you can fall deep into and not be able to climb back out. And there is a certain tragedy about that really sticks with me. And me and Asia, for entirely different reasons, we both had personal connections to that kind of stuff. And so it took a lot to dig kind of deep down within ourselves and pull out something that's so violent, that's so intense, that's so far gone into despair, and to somehow draw something out of that by the end of the movie is hopeful. Like, you can take this character and you can break her down to absolutely nothing, but then say, maybe she can change. And there were a lot of people who messaged me about that movie, and they said it made an impact on them. And they said that it helped them to empathize with people a little better, understand something that maybe they hadn't had experience with. And that's kind of what I live for with it. Number 2 would probably be a more recent project, which was called Skeletons. And I shot that at end of 2021, early 2022, and it was released about a year ago. That one is interesting because it has more modern production quality. And for that one, I didn't have like a whole big crew. Like, my production designer was really great on it, because I can't do production design to save my life. But the rest of the crew, for the most part, like setting up lights, setting up audio, cinematography, camera work, like that was actually all me. And but it looks a lot better than many, many films I'd made in the past. And that makes sense, just because, I had more experience at that point.
Right.
but it was my first foray into comedy. It was very much a dark comedy. It's, you know, it's this movie about where these two girls who are friends, lifelong friends, are arguing in a closet because one of them was making out with the other one's dad. And I enjoyed the look on your face there. That's what I want from people. And then it just descends into this whole big, it's funny, but it's terribly tragic at the same time, because at first you're laughing at it, and at first you're like, oh my God, this is ridiculous. But then you just see this friendship just fall apart before your eyes. And you see just how bad and how abusive this one friend has been to her other friend for years, and maybe the other friend hasn't even like really noticed it, or really hasn't even, you know, has tried to look past it like many of us do for our friends. And like with most people, these things come from a place of great pain, and they do quite a lot of damage to other people. And so I enjoyed that element of the film where it's so tragic, it's so awful, but at the same time you're laughing at it because it's bombastic. It's like over the top. It's got these weird twists and turns, these ridiculous lines in it. And so that all came together, I thought, pretty well. It did what I wanted it to do. I'm not a comedy writer by any stretch of the imagination, but I was happy with that product. And then probably my third favorite would be Last Halloween from 2017. I did that for the MOFA 3 Weeks of Terror film competition, which is where you get 3 weeks to write, shoot, and edit a horror film based on a genre that you are given, and sometimes other elements depending on how they structure it at the time. And this movie is about where there is a mother who is on Halloween night just in her kitchen, like doing a bunch of mom stuff, like making Christmas cookies, carving pumpkins, things like that. And her daughter is out with a group of kids trick-or-treating. And while she is trick-or-treating, there is a stranger who takes her, and the mother's like tearing through the neighborhood looking for her child and such. And that film I really, really liked because it blended a lot of oppositional aesthetics, and it was my first time really doing that. So where, you know, it's horrifying subject matter, but it's juxtaposed with kids trick-or-treating and Halloween decorations and pumpkins and all these fun things, all these things that we think of as joyous, and yet there's this dark side to them. There's this frightening side to them, and there's this element of real horror there. And even though it's a scary film, I used a lot of old, like, you know, 1920s type swing, ragtime type music. And I felt that that offset the scary vibes of it. And so, and that was something that like later on down the line, I got more and more into as a filmmaker. Just like I was just talking about with Skeletons, juxtaposing comedy with tragedy and such, and how I think that that's a strong storytelling technique. So for this one as well, that was kind of my first foray into trying that. It was something I'd always wanted to do stylistically. And I don't know, I just think it's cool. Like, I think holiday stuff is cool. Like stuff that takes place on Halloween, Christmas, those like super festive holidays. They're such a quintessential part of American culture. And when you have those things, I think it's so fascinating to see crazy stuff go down and lives be changed forever around these otherwise, you know, festive events. Really peels back the layers on all the social implications related to these things. And I felt that, you know, whereas, you know, a lot of times when you do horror, you might do zombies, you might do werewolves, you might do stuff like that, but like the real life horror of, you know, losing your child to some faceless apparition, I could not imagine anything more frightening than that. And so that was what I wanted to get into. Now, the interesting thing with Last Halloween is, unlike Skeletons and Powder Room, it has some pretty significant failures as well. Like, for instance, the third act of Last Halloween, the climax of the film, actually I think is rather poorly directed on my part. And I critique myself every time I see the movie. I critique myself for it. I'm just like, that is not how you direct that stuff. But it was a good learning experience, and it's still a perfectly good movie. I still really enjoy it, and it's something I learned from. So I think very fondly of that one.
Great. Well, thank you for sharing. Did I miss anything? You're a writer, you're a director, you're a cinematographer, you're an actor, actually. On the
Technically,
down
yes.
low.
It's been a number of years, and
Yeah.
I was mostly theater in high school.
Sure.
I would do it again.
Yeah.
But you're right. Mainly writing, directing, and cinematography.
Okay. What's your favorite?
Well, it's not cinematography. I love cinematography, but writing and directing definitely take precedence over cinematography. And I'm
Gun
better
to
at
your
that.
head, writing or directing? You can only do one for the rest of your life, Tyler.
Ooh. See, that's going to be tough. Because it's like, as a writer, if you're only writing, then you have no control over how your stories are then conveyed visually. And so much of the meaning is there. And not just, the visual aesthetics, but so many other elements of the film that bring it together. And, 5 different directors are, of course, going to direct the same script 5 very different ways.
Yeah. And I love talking about that because I think it's so important, because people were like, why would that actor sign up for this movie when it's so terrible? And they know good stories because we've seen them in good stories. And it's like, well, it's because they read a good story, and then the person telling the story didn't do a good job.
It happens, most
Right?
definitely. I've seen good scripts get torn apart by that director.
Oh, yeah. And it's, oh my goodness, if there's anything more heartbreaking than that, I don't know. So I think the question here is the process. Which one just lights you up more? Like the process of writing or the process of directing?
I enjoy the process of directing more. I enjoy having the script more than I enjoy writing the script. There are times where I really enjoy it. There are times where it's really flowing, that it is deeply gratifying for me to write. More often than not, though, it's me working through problems and then eventually getting to the finish line, and then eventually looking back and saying, like, wow, I'm very proud of this. But for the actual process, directing is what I find to be most gratifying in the moment when it is actually happening.
Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure, absolutely. Because with directing, there's so many different parts. There's, it really is a gun to your head moment. It is intense. It is immersive. You are right in the moment with all these people who depend on you to make it happen. And you're just sitting there the whole time just like, can I get the best out of myself? Am I going to be able to get what's in my head out onto this screen here? And there's so many inputs that go into it. And you have to be sitting there thinking about your blocking, thinking about how to guide your actors, how to communicate with your actors, how to communicate with your cinematographer to make sure that you guys are guiding the visual aesthetic. And by the same token, your production designer. And then you have to be thinking like, okay, what's happening, when this person reaches down to pick up this glass, it's going to edit between 3 shots. What is the pacing going to be in the edit? What is the movement going to be in the edit? How are these 3 shots going to splice together? You can't see that on set. You can't do that on set. You have to be able to see it in your head. And, you have to be thinking like, okay, how is the music that I'm ultimately going to use going to affect this particular scene? How is literally every single element going to affect every other element? It is the, quintessential example of something being greater than the sum of its parts. And that's what you're trying to do as a director, is to take this thing and make it greater than the sum of its parts. And it is deeply gratifying when you get it right, but there is a heart-pumping intensity to it when you get there, where you have to do it. You have to deliver, and you have to do it right now. There's money on the line, there's people's time on the line, and there's the quality of your film that's on the line. And something about that is very exhilarating.
So you actually like you like the stress, the juggling act of it.
I like the adrenaline rush. The
Sure.
stress is very annoying. and it depends on the day, like which one there's more of. Like, for instance, if I'm like really tired when I get into a set, it's probably going to be more stress.
Yeah.
And that's going to be annoying. I mean, I worked through it, and if you do manage to work through it, like, you can get great stuff.
Yeah.
But on better days, it's more of an adrenaline rush. And when you encounter a problem like a roadblock that just, you're trying to drive down the road, and then there's this like giant moose that comes in there and just decides to sit down right in the middle of the road, and you're just like, how do I get my car around this thing? Stuff like that happens every time in film projects.
Yes.
Those can slow you down. Those can be very stressful. Those can kind of hurt the adrenaline a bit. And sometimes those are the things you look back on and say like, oh man, that was just really unfortunate. But it's all part of the game. It's something that's just going to happen, even if you have a lot of money, which we don't. But even if you have a lot of money, it's something that occasionally happens.
Yeah.
And with less money and with less resources, it happens more often.
Yeah.
And so those kind of things, they are stressful. But it's a part of life.
Yeah.
And it's part of doing something like this that's so collaborative. And so, you just kind of work through it.
Yeah. So I just shot my second film, which you helped me shoot. You're going to be the DP on it. And we had the shoot yesterday. That's false. We had the shoot
2 days ago, right?
2 days ago.
Time is just
my
evaporating in the
goodness.
wind.
And I just couldn't believe that like all these people came out, because I wasn't paying them. I bought them some dinner or lunch or whatever, and we were just all there, and like you're saying, collaborative, working towards the same goal, just people who are there because they love storytelling through film, and like that's incredible. And so I'm so glad there's no gun to my head, and I get to and I get to do both. Before I ask you the question. Yes,
I'm worried about what the question is going to be.
No, don't be worried. You'll do great. But before we do that, where can people find your work and follow your journey, and tell us about some upcoming projects to keep an eye out for?
Certainly. So you can find me on Facebook, just Tyler Mason. My business page, FallenLight, is also on Facebook. My website is FallenLightFilms.com. And then you can find me on Instagram at FallenLight Media. I should have standardized it all a little better, but whatever.
We'll get to it.
We'll figure that out later.
We'll get to it.
So yeah, that's where
and I'll go ahead and link everything in the description as well.
And then also, if you want to go to YouTube or Vimeo, you're going to find that under FallenLight as well. And then as far as upcoming projects are concerned, I am actually doing a project in October called The Saint, which is about a prostitute who accidentally kills a priest and then attempts to get out of the conservative religious town that she has found herself in. And then this film is also, of course, starring my Powder Room collaborator, Asia Nicole. So, and she and I were both hit very hard by COVID, with our momentum and such. So we are both extremely excited to be getting back into it, going full throttle, because although I did do 2 projects between COVID and now, one of them being Skeletons and one of them being a horror movie that's still in post-production, they were small projects. They're me, 2 or 3 people on crew, 1 or 2 actors, very simple toned down stuff. And The Saint is going to be the first larger scale production that I have done since Powder Room, all the way back 6 years ago. So better late than never, basically.
Yeah.
And then a little bit further down the line in December, I plan to be shooting a horror film called Evaporator, which is about a husband who realized that his wife has vanished into thin air, and he goes looking for her around their creepy rural property.
Yeah. Thank you so much for all that. Now, this is the question. Are you ready?
Maybe.
If you could give one piece of advice to aspiring filmmakers, what would it be?
I have a piece of advice, but it's in 3 parts. First, part 1, and they all funnel into, the same thing. Part 1 is going to be go online, watch as many YouTube tutorials and YouTube videos and things like that as you can regarding what you want to do in filmmaking, because that is what's going to help you learn. That's what's going to help you grow, getting that perspective from other people. And so many different sources. That's going to help you to amalgamate all that information, realize what of it is most valuable and what of it is not, and to be able to ultimately grow yourself based on a tremendous wealth of information that we have at our disposal via the internet, via so many content creators on there. Second part of it is going to be find yourself a mentor figure. It does not have to be somebody who is a Hollywood pro, just somebody who is a few years ahead of you in doing this, something of that nature. And then, learn from them, do projects with them, and that's going to give you the hands-on experience with somebody who can answer your specific questions. Because YouTube is great, but those people are not going to be catering to you specifically. So with a mentor figure or a couple mentor figures, you're going to have maybe a less broad perspective, and you of course need to keep that in mind as a young filmmaker, for everybody out there. But also you're going to have someone who can get hands-on with you and someone who can work with you specifically. And then finally, the third part of it is to do stuff with your peers, do stuff with people roughly at your skill level, and keep doing it. Keep pumping it out over and over and over and over again. And when you think you are not ready, that's good because you're humble, but that's probably the time to do it. Don't wait around for when you're ready, because it's going to be that hands-on experience where, you can learn a lot from YouTube, you can learn a lot from mentors, but ultimately you have to get out there and you have to get your hands on it and you have to do it over and over and over again. And all three of those things are going to come together for any younger filmmaker or any starting filmmaker to grow as an artist or a technician or whatever it is you want to be.
Thank you so much for
You're
that.
very welcome. Thank you for having me on
Oh
here
my
today.
goodness. It's such a pleasure. I think that's it.
That's it. Yep. We don't know how to end it. We don't have a quippy one-liner to go out on.
No, dang it. I really should have thought about that
Maybe over time something will come up.
Yes, definitely. We'll have to. This is good. Now we know we need to finish it. The end.
So we're just going to say cut for the end of this, I
Cut.
suppose.